the story that I think would fascinates me personally, and a lot of people will be interested in, is that of how, as NAFCOC, you decided that you wanted to have your own bank. And this is something that happened in the early days of the formation of the chamber. Who proposed the idea, what you went through, what the conditions were like at that time?
On the very day that NAFCOC was established.
This is in 64 now?
1964.
Right.
We discussed the difficulty of obtaining funds from the existing white banks at the time. And some of us who had experience outside our own country had to share our experience outside South Africa. We had to tell the story that the black people in America have indeed formed their own banks because of the same difficulty of accessing funds from white banks in the United States. The question was then asked, but why don't we form our own bank in South Africa if that is the experience of black people internationally? And then, as if, you know, we were really just playing a small game, some guys stood up and said, but when we leave from here, we are going to lose this idea of starting our own bank. Why don't we look into our pockets and take out any money that is in the pocket and put it on the table? So
there and then.
There and then.
Yeah.
70 rand was raised and put on the table out of our pockets. And we made a resolution there that Mr. Lesolang, SJJ Lesolang, who became the treasurer of the national body, open an account under the name National Fund. And that fund is going to be increased to constitute a fund that would enable us to register a bank in South Africa in days of apartheid. Mr. Maponya, who was very enthusiastic as the first chairman of NACOC, stood up at the end of our meeting to say we have something like 18 million black people in South Africa. We just need to go out from here and ask each black man to give us 1 rand, and we'll come back here with enough money to register the bank. But this was better said than done. We came back the following year with very little money that had accrued to the National Fund. And the question was, why? Our people were reluctant to see another proposed institution failing, because before then, in the 1920s already, we had people like Clemens Kadali, who came from Malawi with the idea of establishing an African bank. And that effort had resulted in a failure. Various other efforts were made, but then this time we said it's about time that we build confidence in ourselves. And many years passed. The National Fund was increasing by very little amounts. Every year we reported at our conference, little money has come into the National Bank. Until 1972, when I was privileged to go to London. And this was after we had done some research about what were the actual problems that we were supposed to solve in the process of building this bank. And a very good study was made by an economist from Hungary, which we employed to do that study for us. And he indicated, among others, that our first problem was to create trust, an atmosphere of trust in this whole effort. Because without that, the bank will never succeed. And he also indicated the legal difficulties at that time that would have to be confronted. And then later he did indicate that raising R1 million from black people at that time together was also going to be a very difficult task. But it was not an insurmountable task. He really emphasizes that no nation has ever developed that did not face the same problems that you have. You just make up your minds to face this problem and overcome it. Now, in 1972, I had that privilege of accompanying a group that was touring Europe. And when I was in London, I had the opportunity to have a meeting with the chairman of Barclays Bank, Sir Anthony Keith, and he invited me to lunch with part of our NAFCO group. And then at the luncheon, I was asked to speak. And I spoke on the problems faced by the African Bank. And in order for us to solve our problem, we needed training. We needed members that could help to develop trust in our efforts. And I gave all the findings of our research. Then I ended up by saying, I feel at this moment that the Barclays Bank has a part to play in this, in helping us to find a solution. And I believe that Barclays Bank owes us. They owe us something. We, the black people of South Africa, have helped to make Barclays Bank what it is in our country. And it is your turn to plow back something. And I was somewhat astonished when the chairman stood up to confess, yes, we owe you something. And we are prepared to do something. One, we are prepared to provide training because your people have been denied training for a long time in that country. We will provide training. If it cannot be done in your country, we will provide training outside your country, in Nigeria, for instance, or even in London. The second thing, we are prepared to buy some shares in that bank if it is created. And those two offers solved much of the problems that we had and gave answers to the questions that were asked and we were unable to answer.
We will pick up the conversation in a short while.